What's going on, everybody? It's Matt, aka the Lumberjack Landlord, here with his good buddy, Millennial Mike, who's probably heard that phrase 937 times in the last 2 days as we've recorded just an absolute ungodly amount of content for you. How's it going, Mike?
I'm good, man. And yeah, I have heard I'm the Lumberjack Landlord a lot of times on a lot of different clips.
So much so that my voice is weak now. I got to stop shouting all the time. Dion, good to have you here, my man.
Howdy. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be doing this in a state where it isn't frozen solid.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, yesterday that wind chill at 9 degrees was chilly. Yeah. Today we're really warm. We're about 41. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's I'm enjoying the summer in the wintertime. It's very nice to have. So guys, what I wanted to get together and talk with you about today was, I think a lot of first-time investors or people considering investing, I think that all of them have at least one mountain in their way. Mm-hmm. And I think what's really interesting is they perceive it as this unbelievable, amazing mountain because they heard one story from one landlord before, or they saw something on the internet and it just absolutely paralyzes them in fear. But what they realize is if they actually take the leap and they get into it and they start moving things forward, what they quickly realize is that actually wasn't really even a thing. So what I wanted to do was start out today, Dion, with you and have you kind of talk about when you were thinking about getting into real estate, you know, what was that mountain or those pairs of mountains that you're looking at and saying, boy, I don't know that I ever want to deal with that, go through that if I can. What was that thing for you?
I think I had the normal fear that every investor has when they're thinking of having a rental. And it's a fear that we look at wrong. Mm-hmm. What if I can't find a tenant? I was so afraid of it that when I did jump in, I made the mistake of thinking, I don't think I could find a tenant. I don't want to advertise. I don't want to list a property because who can trust a stranger, right? Strangers will take advantage of me. Let me rent to a friend with a handshake.
Yeah.
No lease.
Yeah.
I'd have been better off not finding a tenant.
Yeah, true story.
And so having listed rentals for over a decade now and buying some properties that not always occupied, my preference is to buy tenant occupied properties, but sometimes I'll buy one that's vacant. And I've had 4 tenant turnovers in 10 years. Finding a tenant is never the issue. It's weeding through the multiple qualified tenants who apply for a place. That's the struggle. So I think the fear pivots in the beginning from what if I can't find a tenant to the correct thought. How much might I have to lower my rents when I'm thinking what they're worth to find a tenant? I haven't had to yet. Mm-hmm. So I think I keep underestimating how high rents are going when I list a new property. So once I got past that fear, I couldn't wait to add more units. Once I realized, got to like the 3rd or 5th unit, and I bought a place that was vacant on one side and the other side had a tenant in it. And I had to weed through dozens of people with better credit scores than me, higher income than me. That fear changed to, how do I get more properties? Because there's so many people trying to rent them.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think Mike, what was yours? Because you're kind of newer to the game in just the last few years.
Yeah.
So what was the thing that you looked at and were just like, this could sink me. This is my biggest concern.
I wasn't worried about not finding a tenant. I was worried about placing the wrong tenant and then having to go through evictions. Oh my God, I picked the wrong person. And so for me, my biggest concern, I just invested in this rental property. It's across the country. We're putting a tenant in there. I don't know the tenant. I can't easily go see them. I have to trust my property manager. I have to trust her lawyer. I have to trust the eviction process. If this tenant doesn't pay, it's gonna hurt and it's gonna be a tough problem to fix. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I buy that first property and I'm just waiting for the bad news. And I buy the second property and I'm waiting for the bad news. And then the third property. And eventually I start to realize it's really not that bad. Mm-hmm. You know, I know Dion's never had an eviction. Matt, you and I, in the thousands of clips we've been doing, like 9 evictions total over 22 years and 130 plus properties. I've had one single eviction. I only have 10 units, one eviction, and that was for an inherited tenant who we had to evict immediately after buying the property, which is pretty normal if you're buying rental properties. A lot of times landlords are selling because they don't want to deal with their problem tenant. So you kind of know that going in at the purchase. It's not a out of the blue type thing. But I was scared, afraid, concerned about the eviction process. Being from Washington, oh my God, how long is it going to take? What happens if there's a moratorium? Am I going to be making a mortgage payment for a year without them getting out? And then when they leave, they'll destroy the property. None of that ever materialized. Even with a guy that I did evict, we had to pay to clean the property up. It wasn't destroyed. He just left all the trash there. And so I would encourage people, if you're concerned about an eviction, you need to come into it with a mindset of it's going to happen. It's a planned cost. It is an eventuality. You prepare for it. You have the conversation with the property manager. You know what the time frame is to get people out. You come to terms with that and build yourself up to be prepared for it. And then when it happens, you just deal with it like you would if a water heater went out. It's going to happen eventually. It's another expense, and it's part of the process.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really well said. I think that, those are probably two of the biggest ones, which is, getting the next tenant that, after that first one moves out that you might have inherited. And then, oh my gosh, what do I do if I actually have to go through an eviction? Both of those steps are really ordered, right? Like doing an eviction is a really very process oriented task. And so it's then you do this and then you do this. If they do this, you do that. If they do that, you do this. It's very straightforward. So a lot of people kind of get wrapped around the axle. If you get a professional tenant, really the only thing is just usually takes longer. Just don't do the wrong thing. Recognize it's a business thing and not a personal thing. And usually that does a pretty good job at trying to help you get through that. I'd say mine is probably this constant belief or fear that every problem will happen after midnight and that you will always have to pick up the phone and be like, oh my word, what's going on? Okay, yeah, I'll be right there. In 22 years, and about 4,000 tenant years, I have had 3 phone calls after 11 p.m. 3. Wow. It just doesn't happen nearly like people think it does. So in that long a time, I've had 3 of those calls after 11. I've had maybe a couple dozen in 22 years after even 7 o'clock. It just largely doesn't happen. And so when all these people are trying to squat up and make sure that I've got like 7 handy guys and this, that, and the other, and okay, let's negotiate the rate and this, blah, no, relax. Largely, objects at rest largely tend to stay at rest. This isn't a thing where it's a constant thing and it's always like the next thing to fix, the next thing to break. Sometimes when you buy a dump, like that can be the case. But when we buy a dump, that's why we go in there and we gut rehab it. We'll spend $35,000-$40,000 doing all that stuff to eliminate ever getting the calls. You'll spend that 35 grand over the next 5 years. Nothing will be nice though. You'll just have spent all that time patching and fixing and going back over it and doing that sort of work. So I think the major thing that I want to encourage people is on my side, when it was a complete and total dump, yeah, we would do a rehab first. When it wasn't, when it was just something that was dated, we would go in, we would check out, we'd make sure that we have the proper number of shutoffs, shutoffs on the right plumbing lines, supply lines to make sure that if something ever did start happening, we can say right under the sink, just turn the lever this way up. So it's not even with the line anymore. Little things like that, where it really allows us from a process perspective. This is exactly what my course is about, is hitting the nail on the head when it comes to being proactive on the things that you need to make sure that if you ever do get that call, that you're ready to respond and ready to respond to it quickly. Because often the fear that people have of that is because they don't have any idea who they'd call. Well, you need to do that work first. Understand who you would call. That way, when you're picking up the phone, you're calling guy number 1, you're calling guy number 2. And one of those guys is going to answer and they're going to be able to take care of the problem if for some reason you can't. So be encouraged from that, because I think a lot of people don't do anything because they're afraid of getting an eviction. They're afraid of not being able to rent out the unit again. They're afraid of getting their life completely disrupted by nothing but nonstop calls after 11 p.m. It just isn't that way. So hopefully that's encouraging to all you. Dion, tell everybody where they can find you, my friend.
They can find me right here on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom. There is one more fear I would like to address.
Please. Yeah.
And so most of the people I talk to, the fear comes in these 2 categories. First, what if I can't find a tenant? Second, what if a tenant trashes my property? And this was a fear that I never really had that fear. I just kind of, my brother told me your tenants are going to trash your property, plan on it. Right. So I didn't have that fear, but a lot of the people that I talk to have that fear. They always ask, what do you do if a tenant trashes your property? When you first start investing and you've saved up reserves, lenders are going to require that you have a certain amount of reserves. If a tenant trashes your property, it feels like you're paying for those repairs. As you've owned a rental for a couple of years and a set amount of your gross rents, I do 10% for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, well, 5% for vacancy. So 15% total of gross rents is mentally set aside into my reserve account until that reserve account gets full. Once the reserve account is full, that money goes into the investing fund, right? I don't add it to my lifestyle fund. I buy the next asset sooner. But that reserve account is the tenant's money.
Right.
When the tenant trashes the property, the tenants have paid for the trashed property, not just their deposits, but that part of gross rents. When we calculate the numbers on buying a rental, we make sure it's going to cash flow with principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and setting aside for things like a tenant trashing your property. So for those first 2 years, I totally get it. It's a fear. It feels like you're paying for it. But after you've been doing this for a couple of years, I'm not saying I look forward to tenants trashing properties, but I look forward to a roof failing. I get to take the tenant's money, put a roof on my property, and have a protected 30-year product covering my asset that I didn't pay for. The tenants paid for that. So that's a fear that you can get over by looking at your reserve account as the money set aside for tenants trashing your property.
Yep. Yeah. Often it's the 10,000 hours of preparation that meets that one moment of opportunity. And I think that often people need to be concerned about not being prepared. But if you've done the work and you are prepared and you've done the research and you have the right vendors on the list, all of those things are in play, then it drastically reduces any true calamity. Even in the crazy world of, oh my gosh, we didn't shut off the water and it flooded. At the end of the day, we could still fix it. We had some blowers in there and it was just not a big deal. But the reason it wasn't a big deal for us was because we were prepared. So within 48 hours, they were back in there. Everything was dried out with the major blowers that we have, and they paid for that repair. Thank you very much. But I think that that's really critical. I think that if you're looking at these things and looking at these mountains in front of you and not understanding how to get over them, I think those are some of the core mountains that you can build and prepare to know that you're going to have to handle, but know that it's not rocket science. It's very process oriented and something you can absolutely handle if you've done the work beforehand. That way you're prepared for really, truly anything that comes up. And even if something comes up that you didn't prepare for, largely you have an offshoot of something else that you've done that will help you get through that current mess that you're going through. So Dion, tell everybody where they can find you, my friend.
We did that already. Right here on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom. My memory is catching on to you.
It must be all the modeling poses that Mike's making me do. It absolutely rots my brain.
I can't wait to use those.
He's like, no, this one. I was like, shut up.
Oh yeah.
I was like, you don't know how to get back to my house from here. I'm just gonna let you out here. Mike, where can everybody find you, my friend?
Everybody should follow me on Instagram because I have been exposing the lumberjack landlord. I got clickbait thumbnail-esque pictures of him doing some extremely sus behavior. Follow me on Instagram at Millennial Mike if you want to see funny pictures of him or pictures of him back when he was a stud in his younger days. I posted some of those too. Millennial Mike, YouTube, Instagram. I'll be around lounging on the internet as usual.
So true. Lumberjack Landlord, we always try and create great content for you. Please make sure you hit that like button. Also subscribe. And yeah, we will catch you later. Good luck.